Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, February 2nd, Groundhog Day, February 2nd, 2018, or February 2nd, 2017, or maybe it's February 1st, 2018. I have no idea how we're supposed to play this Groundhog Day joke. Daily Coast Radio is live now. It's live. It's not a tape from yesterday. We're not playing yesterday's tape, anything like that. Bill tells us all the way from Portland, Maine, that it is live. I've just told you that, but why not let Bill tell you? Because he's in Portland and I'm here, and it makes a lot of sense. Good news, Kagro X, that's me. David Waldman didn't see his shadow. Bad news, I think that means he's now a vampire. Do you think that's bad news? I think that would be awesome. Vampires these days have a much better deal. I don't know if you've seen them lately. They're sparkly, they have girlfriends, and it's amazing what they've done with the vampire image these days. I don't know. I haven't really watched any of those things. There's books, there's movies, like teenage vampires, or I don't know, maybe about 5 years ago. Hot thing, vampire shows on TV, even cable TV. So, you know, that's fun because you get nudity because that's what cable TV is all about. You know, Donald Trump knows that. That's why he loves cable so much. Not because there's really... by the way, are we sure that there's no Gorilla Channel thing, that wasn't really true? Or even the story that they made up the thing from... He seems to be getting his own news channel fed to him. People are telling him all sorts of insane things, and he's just believing... I don't know. I would like to know from yesterday about his tweets... Was it yesterday? I guess... Wednesday, his tweets about, you know, how awesome the State of the Union is. Do people tell him you got the biggest audience ever, or does he see the number and the number seems rather large? I mean, it was 40-something million people watched the State of the Union address, which I understand, by the way. Okay, technically it was the least popular or the least widely watched State of the Union in the last 20 years or something like that. I think I saw somebody say that. I don't know. Doesn't make much of a difference one way or the other, except, of course, in the one way, the one sense in which he says, well, it was the most watched ever in history, and it was not that. But I'm curious whether people tell him that, or whether he just sees a large number and says, it's probably the biggest in history because I'm Donald Trump and I'm awesome, or does he know that it isn't and then just says, I'll say it anyway? I'm very curious about what drives him to do things like that, because he, of course, I mean, he's famous for doing it. He does it all the time, and I think there was some coverage of his speech to the Republican retreat the other day, and also, you know, more ridiculous claims. Oh, Orrin Hatch said I was better than Jesus, you know, whatever it was. I'm a better president than Washington and Lincoln, which Hatch, you know, like corrected the record a little bit later and said, I didn't say that you were. I said, you know, I think he said, I think you could be, but you're not yet. I didn't say you were or whatever. And then later on, it just turned out he was just, you know, like, do you have change for a 5? There was no mention of Lincoln or Washington or anything. But he delivers them with a little smile on his face. Sometimes I do think, you know, there are some people, if a comedian delivering those lines, you would think, okay, I get that that's their shtick. And occasionally I think, what if it is just, I mean, it is really just his shtick, but I wonder if in his mind, do you think he ever thinks I'm just kidding? Or do you think he believes it? I don't know. Everybody has said there's so much narcissism involved that I guess maybe he really does believe it. I guess I can't get my head around how you look at a number and go, that's the biggest number in history. If it's not, or if it's easy to find out whether it is or isn't, or you could assign people to find out whether it is or isn't. I've never been really entirely clear about that. Anyway, lots going on this morning. The president is up and tweeting, but so far not terribly cantankerous. He's focusing his fire, of course, on the FBI and Department of Justice and how terrible they are, and doing his best to undermine the investigation of his activities and the activities of those around him. And the Nunes memo, I guess, is set for release today. Have they not yet distributed that. Word is, I guess this morning's word and last evening's word is people are beginning to see it. People higher up the food chain than you and I in Congress, inside the White House. And the word that's being used to describe it is it's kind of a dud. It does. I mean, I think we sort of knew that it would be. But I guess if you're making the whole thing up, I would make something more explosive than what they got. But apparently, Devin Nunes, I guess, isn't that inventive a person. And so, all right, the garbage is supposed to come out today. I guess we start the clock until, confidential, clandestine sources begin to disappear or get murdered. And then congratulate Devin Nunes on having sentenced them to death. And then we move on. I guess there's just not that much left to take a look at. Anyway, others are tweeting in all sorts of input for the morning, and we can take a look at what's in pocket for today, catch up perhaps on some stories, and I'll comb through the old Twitter feed and remind myself, what have I been yelling and screaming about over the past couple of hours that I thought was important? And if I ever had a radio show, which I will have in a few minutes, I might talk about during that day. Kate Sherrill sends me this one. Anthony Scaramucci back in the news somehow. I don't know why he didn't just get a job after being fired from the White House, but I guess this is a lot easier and it's more fun. He, like Donald Trump, loves to be in the newspapers and magazines, even if it's not doing anything. But he's back in, and I guess he figured out the way to get paid for not doing very much by the media is to sell them stories about things that they want to print. Like Steve Bannon is a giant jerk, so I will tell a magazine that. Who's got some money? Vanity Fair? Vanity Fair it is. Vanity Fair has this piece here. Kate has sent me their tweet. Their tweet says, Steve Bannon, says Anthony Scaramucci, quote, is literally the pig in George Orwell's Animal Farm that stands on his two legs the minute he gets power. And that may very well be true. I wish it was actually true. If he literally was a pig in a book and we didn't really have to worry about him too much, we could just say, I'm not reading this book, and that would be the end of it. But I imagine he means not literally, because whatever. The headline of the piece, as I click through, just out of curiosity here, is, quote, there's several quotes. The first, I guess, of three taken from Scaramucci in reviewing his 15 seconds of fame inside the White House. The first quote is censored for our purposes and for Vanity Fair's purposes. Effing Sith Lord. I guess I don't know who he's describing, but it doesn't matter. And I think he misunderstands the whole, approach of the Star Wars universe or whatever. Why make them a Sith Lord? That's actually kind of badass and requires some discipline and presumably some knowledge. By the way, some procedural ability as well. I don't mind telling you. Let's see, next quote here. Effing Sith Lord, horrific leakers, says the guy who's talking to Vanity Fair, and berserkazoid craziness. The mooch recalls his brief shining fortnight at the center of American politics. And believe me, he loves the fact not only that people are talking to him at all, but keep calling him the mooch because that makes it sound... Which mooch? The mooch. The famous mooch. And, I don't know. The guy's garbage, and there's really no reason to worry about what he had to say about the it is a fortnight, 2 weeks, whatever, 10 days that he spent in the White House. Whatever. William D. Cohen has put this piece together, and it looks rather lengthy. I'm kind of curious what the lead might be. We'll see if they can rope us in with this one, and then we'll take a generalized tour around the electronic atmosphere. Let's see. The day after the election, I was in Trump Tower, said Anthony Scaramucci. Wowie wow. I was in Trump's office. We were celebrating, congratulating him on his victory. I'm sure he would have let anybody in off the street if they were going to come in and say, congratulations on your victory. You're the most victorious, huge guy ever. He says, you've got to come help me. You've got to drop that stupid business of yours. Okay. I can give you You know how he talks. I can give you an agency that's 40 times the size of your business. Drop that stupid business of yours and come work for me. I said, okay, I'm happy to help. That worked really well. Scaramucci, the Wall Street hedge fund impresario, maybe, and Donald Trump's perfect foil, is irrepressible. I would like to repress him, but it's impossible. Some 6 months after his historically short-lived tenure at the White House as the White House Communications Director, he has embarked on something of a rehabilitation tour. Why? He has been defending Trump in Davos. Why was he in Davos? On CNN and in the Wall Street Journal, when few others have or would. The obvious subtext is that in these difficult days, the president needs a friend, and the mooch, as he is known by almost no one, is the most loyal friend there is. Could Anthony Scaramucci actually talk his way back into the West Wing? In Trump world, stranger things have happened. But, of course, he's spending all his time telling everybody telling everybody the inside secrets of the White House and what a horrible S-storm it was. But I'm sure he'll be right back in there. Okay, so, you know what? I don't know. Am I really interested in it? Here's news about what a jackass Steve Bannon is. Oh, he's fired too? Oh, yeah, well, I hate Reince Priebus. I call him Rancid Penis. How about that? Yeah, well, he's gone too. Oh, yeah. In fact, I mean, you're long gone. You're yesterday's news. So what have you got for me? Well, I got yesterday's news about yesterday's other people. Okay. We could check back in. I'm sure there's plenty to make fun of in there, and we'll use it as backup material if necessary. I just, all of a sudden, I'm kind of like losing my interest in what Anthony Scaramucci has to say about anything. But I'm sure it's entertaining. No doubt about that. Let's see. Oh, a comment from yesterday evening, which I guess I'll try to commit to memory, although I find that every once in a while when you just point out point blank to me what the pronunciation of something is, I say, thank you. And then I forget it. And then all I remember is as the next time the name comes up or the word comes up, I say, how did they say I was supposed to pronounce? Did I say this and they said it was that, or which one? I can't remember. And then I just take a stab in the dark. The entries in the glossary today from Bruce McFarlane, he says the pronunciation police are on the prowl. Matthew Miller tweeting around Rosenstein, not Rosenstein. Mueller, not Mueller. Come on, people. It's been months now. Get it together. Which I file in, say, third place behind you. These are the things you need to know because you're a lower level kind of human being. This is what you need to know about XYZ. And then, of course, my favorite, the while you were distracted by X, the really important thing, Y happened, takes. I can't wait to get up every morning and find out what an idiot the media world thinks I've been for paying attention to the things they were telling me. Anyway, let's see. What other things today? Is this something about the president's schedule today? It is Friday. Is he not, sneaking out of town and heading to Mar-a-Lago? I wonder whether they've talked him into suppressing his Mar-a-Lago trips while he's under fire. I don't really know why he would agree to do that, or maybe he's just not leaving until later. What does this say? Mark Knoller is tweeting, to make his point about a border wall, remember that? President Trump today visits, the Customs and Border Patrol National Targeting Center, which uses satellites and other technology to detect smugglers, terrorists, dangerous cargo entering the U.S., looking for a border security / DACA deal with Congress. Yeah, well, I'm sure that's proceeding apace. We are at February 2nd, and that means we are, 6 days away from the next shutdown deadline, which they thoughtfully bumped up to Thursday, thus proving the point that they can pick and choose a better and more convenient day and time. But so far, they haven't, no progress on Jones' idea of moving the deadline to noon rather than midnight. I mean, it's easily enough doable. You just say it. But I don't know why they insist on midnight. I guess, I don't know. Maybe they enjoy the midnight oil thing. They love burning oil, so maybe that's it. I guess that could explain it. Let's see. What else have we here? Let's go back and check in Pocket. I know there are a couple of things that we skipped over in the past couple of days. Yesterday was chock full of stories and news that I wanted to bring to your attention. Friday's my last chance. Let's see. The latest I have in Pocket, anyway, a piece from Politico insisting that Republicans will be giving up, they say, on Obamacare repeal to the extent that they still need it. And it's got some interesting detail. And Burgess Everett, the other Burgess in our lives, wrote this piece, Republicans giving up on Obamacare. Most GOP lawmakers aren't interested in another failed effort to gut the health law in an election year. As though anyone could forget what they tried to do during the non-election year. Headlined White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, where the retreat is going on. Republicans are giving up on their years-long dream of repealing Obamacare. Isn't that interesting, by the way? It is a years-long dream. It's about a decade almost that they're into repeal, root and branch, yada, yada, and it isn't until they have unified control under Republican auspices of the entirety of the federal government that they finally give up on Obamacare repeal. Though the GOP still controls both chambers of Congress and maintains the ability to jam through a repeal and replace bill via a simple majority, remember, they could do most of that under reconciliation, there are no discussions of doing so here at the House and Senate Republicans' joint retreat at the Greenbrier Resort. Republicans doubt they can even pass a budget providing for the powerful party line reconciliation procedure used to pass tax reform last year. Time out just for a second. Before we let that myth take off and acquire a life of its own, reconciliation isn't meant to be considered a party line procedure. It's simply streamlined and simplified so that, as you know, of course, a reconciliation bill can be passed with a simple majority. There's certainly nothing about it that suggests that it ought to be a party line vote, though it does, of course, enable a party line vote if you want it that way, I guess. But I would imagine that the aim always was, well, if we could have some votes from across the aisle, that would be helpful too. But I guess at bottom, if you say something is passable with a simple majority, well, obviously, if there's going to be a majority in Congress, so long as we have a two-party system, which is another reason why we'll always have a two-party system. Even the two independents in the Senate, the body in which it's actually perhaps possible to function as a true independent, since there's only 100 members, but the two independents in the Senate decide very consciously to caucus with one of the two parties because it's ridiculous to set yourself up as a third pole and attempt to attract more power to yourself. It's just too long a process, and you're basically sitting on your hands while you're waiting for other independents to show up. Anyway, that's the political science lesson of the day, I guess. But anyway, it was never, I guess, explicitly intended to be something that enabled party line decision-making and party line votes. Obviously, it's sort of inherent in the simple majority thing. But then again, most things are, well, in years past, were contemplated as passing by a simple majority. Hopefully, you would have more votes. But it wasn't until the wide or large-scale abuse of the filibuster in the past 15-plus years that we've seen a resort, I guess, to reconciliation. And of course, the definition of Senate activity revolving around everybody knows something takes, whatever you want to do, takes 60 votes in the Senate. It doesn't, but we make it that way. All right, we create our own reality. Fine. So, Republicans doubt they can even pass a budget. That's even bigger news. And, of course, the budget would be the starting point for enabling the use of reconciliation, whether you vote on something by party lines or not. So that is pretty amazing all by itself. We're not going to have a budget. We're about, like we said, 6 days from a shutdown crisis, which is not a budget problem per se, but is, of course, part of the budgeting process that is in crisis and continuing crisis. I don't think have we had a year since, when was the last time we didn't need a CR? Or I guess an even better question is, when was the last time we didn't need either a CR or a last-minute omnibus rolling up all of the unpassed appropriations bills? When was the last time regular order prevailed in the budgetary process? A budget was passed and the appropriations bills were passed individually and on time. I don't even know when the last time that might have happened. And I don't even require that they all be passed. I'm just saying maybe when was the last time that the omnibus appropriations bill that made it to the floor contained the appropriations of, let's say, fewer than 4 of the subcommittees. Roughly 1/3 of the appropriations committee's business. I couldn't tell you. And that's pretty amazing, really. So anyway, but here they are leaning on the reconciliation process as their last-ditch magic to try to pass anything. And remember, when it comes to major legislation, there's been the tax thing, and there's been the healthcare thing, and what they've both been reconciliation bills. Is that right? And now, why is my memory fading on what happened with the tax bill? Yeah, it must have been. I know it was. They had the incredible use of reconciliation adding to the deficit. I don't know why I would blank on something like that. The only things that they've done, really, of any serious consequence have been through reconciliation. And they're saying, we don't think we're going to be able to get a budget passed here and use reconciliation again. It's just not going to happen. That's pretty serious. I don't think leadership wants to, said Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, who worked with South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, South Carolina, of course, on a last-ditch repeal effort last fall. In the sense of Graham Cassidy, a partisan exercise doesn't look like it. Republicans' decision to abstain from another attempt at gutting Barack Obama's health law, at least this year, goes back on a pledge the party has made to voters since 2010. Reminder, it's 2018. Right now, and it underscores how Republicans overpromised in their ability to reform the nation's health care and never fully recognized how divided the party is over Obamacare planks like protecting pre-existing conditions and preserving the law's Medicaid expansion. And by the way, repeal and replace. The replace never showed up. It was this running joke for like 5 years. We're coming up on the 8th year, and they're giving up on their attempts, and they never really did put that out there. Just sort of, restating that one for the record. Let's see. Now it says the GOP is facing reality. That's ridiculous. No, they're not. Senate Republicans would struggle to pass a bill slashing at Obamacare under the best circumstances this year. They lost the Senate seat in Alabama in December and are down another vote as Senator John McCain of Arizona undergoes cancer treatment. GOP leaders would rather put the debacle of last year's failed attempt behind them. It would be a heavy lift, I think everybody knows, said Senator John Thune of South Dakota, the number 3 GOP leader. We sort of tested the limits of what we can do in the Senate last year, and we're one vote down from where we were then. Well, that is realistic. I wouldn't say they're facing reality, but they do have a handle on that, or he does anyway. Republicans may very well lose the House or the Senate this fall, which could be both, which would officially stick a fork in their efforts to move a partisan agenda item like Obamacare repeal while President Donald Trump is in office. But there appears to be no urgency to capitalize on unified Republican control, right now anyway. None of the lawmakers interviewed for this story believe that Congress will pass a budget this year that would allow Republicans to use reconciliation to evade the Senate's supermajority requirements. I suppose that could possibly raise the stakes on a nuclear option, and I guess it's worth watching. If you're really literally saying, at this point, close the Senate, we don't expect to pass another major legislative initiative in this Congress, and it's February 2018, maybe McConnell is, he's either giving up on legislating, which is entirely possible, because what do they really want to do? Nothing. Or he's, if something comes down the pike that we need to pass and we just can't do it, fine, we'll nuke the filibuster. Let's see. Rather than make a major play to the frustrated conservative base on health care, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has charted a bipartisan approach. Yeah, right. Sure. Why not? He just told me he did, so I'll say so. In his comments when asked about the matter, see? I don't think we're going to get a budget. And without a budget, I don't think we can do reconciliation. That's true. Said Senator Shelley Moore, how did we decide to say her name? Capito? Again, I told you, when somebody tells me point blank what the pronunciation is, there's just no chance I'm ever going to remember it. The new feature I have on my iPhone, by the way, I don't know if you guys have this one. It must be nearing the end of its life. It's a new feature that no matter how many times you press the volume down button, it'll lower the bars and everything, and then it'll be like, you know what? I'm just going to ring at whatever volume I feel like. It's getting old. You know how people get sort of cantankerous in their golden years, and maybe that's what's happening with my phone. Anyway, that little pinging radar-like sound means it's time for us to take a break and to try to decide how to pronounce the senator from West Virginia's name. Anyway, she says, when you hear a leader speak, he's speaking about bipartisanship, meaning, of course, McConnell. So I think that's the direction we're going to go in this year, because this time he totally means it. You know how that McConnell guy is. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's move over just a bit back to the Nunes memo. There's a stack of articles containing somewhat useful information, some more than others, and of course some good esoterica to share with you for a Friday about surrounding, I guess we should say, the Nunes memo, quote unquote memo, and the whole process being used to release it, which was a little bit puzzling to me at first. I'm glad to have an explainer of sorts, and it's not even from Vox. It's from Lawfare, something Greg sent me yesterday, which I think is probably important to enter on the record. I was a little confused at first about the release process, but it wasn't until we didn't get to learn what the nature of the memo was until a little bit later in the process. And I guess we should have guessed earlier in that process that it was going to contain some classified material. That's why it was difficult to release, because normally the committee produces a report of some kind and you just say, fine, I'll just release it. You want it? Here it is. Why are we going through this process? Here's the deal. Molly Reynolds, writing for Lawfare, she a fellow in governance studies at the Brookings Institution. A puzzling, I've always been curious about the Brookings Institution, like How does that even work? Like, where's the money come from? I guess people donate money to them, but they just get a bunch of people together and say, let's think about stuff. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. There doesn't seem to be any money on that on my end, but okay. They all appear to have good jobs and nice suits, Molly Reynolds included. She writes, since last week, House Republicans have been pushing for the public release of a classified memo alleging government abuse of surveillance authorities and written by House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, or HPSCI, Chairman Devin Nunes, or Nunez, as some people continue to insist on saying, to be culturally sensitive. It's the wrong culture, but okay. Anyway, relying on a little-known and littler used, wow, that was a good usage there, littler used House rule, the committee's Republicans voted on Monday night to make the document public. And I guess if you were wondering, why didn't we see this with Dianne Feinstein's thing, like the 5-day rule and the president has to do something? Well, this is a House rule, not a Senate rule, for one thing. People do sometimes confuse the two, I find on Twitter. What about, why are you yelling about Nunes's thing here? What about Feinstein? Well, why does a House rule not apply to a senator? That's a good question. But I'm sure there are parallel rules. But of course, her memo or her whatever it was that she called what she released was it was the transcript, right, of the interview from the Fusion GPS people. I guess didn't have at least the same level of classified information included in it. So it's an entirely different kind of document as well. So relying on this little known and littler used procedure. Well, let's learn a little bit about it. Much of the process around releasing the memo, and again, every time I say memo, I remember George's admonition not to even call it that. 4 pages of talking points. Much of the process around releasing it has taken place behind closed doors. Additionally, the executive branch appears torn by disagreement. The Justice Department, executive branch, and FBI director, also executive branch, by the way, part of the Justice Department, FBI Director Christopher Wray have both asked Nunes to hold back from releasing the thingy, while President Trump reportedly supports its publication, not because he's made some determination about the safety of releasing the information, but because it will help me. I like it. It's like an extra scoop of ice cream. I authorize that. So, from the perspective of House rules, it's not entirely clear what's going on. But to the extent that there exist procedures guiding the House Intelligence Committee through this process, they are spelled out in the standing rules of the House. That's capitalized. So, and it's not even because Trump capitalized it. She actually knows what she's doing. The standing rules of the House, the ones that are written down and handed down in the book from year to year, and by the way, readopted for most part, year to year, because the House isn't a continuing body. That's all, you remember all that stuff. Okay. So what's in the standing rules? Specifically, we're only concerned with this one. The guidance comes from Rule 10, and that's Roman numeral 10, Rule X. This makes it sound very highly classified. Rule 10 of the standing rules, which governs committees and their jurisdictions. Clause 11 of Rule 10 covers HPSCI, Intelligence Committee, with paragraph G, don't you love this stuff? Delineating the process the committee can use to disclose classified information if, quote, the public interest would be served by such disclosure, period. Now, it isn't, which is good grounds for challenging it, as those who have objected to the release have said, it is misleading, there are serious omissions, purposeful omissions, it jeopardizes sources, perhaps, there's classified information. They say in the Department of Justice, although I understand they have slightly reversed themselves, the FBI has not yet reversed itself, but the Department of Justice now says, I guess the version that the White House is working off of, which may have been changed from what Devin Nunes gave them, which was changed from what the committee voted to send to the White House for their approval. The DOJ says the changes, I guess, make them comfortable now with the release because, I don't know, whoever was advising President Trump told President Trump to tell the DOJ that they should say that, so they did. So, but it makes for an interesting question. The public interest would be served by such a disclosure. So far, that's not entirely clear. But, the final interpreters of the House rules will, of course, be the House. The majority in the House is Republicans. Republicans will do whatever Trump wants. And so they will just simply insist, yes, the public interest is served by such disclosure, despite what the FBI and Department of Justice say. They have no votes here. Pure power play. Once a member of the committee requests such a vote, the committee shall meet within 5 days, another 5-day thing, to vote on the matter. That's what took place last night. That was not actually last night. This was written on January 30th, Tuesday. So Monday night, I guess, was when they had that vote. That's what took place. I got to scroll myself back down to here. There we are. That's what took place last night when the committee convened to vote on the memo's release. If the committee approves the public disclosure of classified information that was submitted to it by the executive branch, and the executive branch asks for the information to remain secret, the committee must notify the president about its decision. So I guess that's what happened. If the committee approves the public disclosure and the executive branch asks for the information to remain secret, the other parts of the executive branch, FBI, DOJ, the committee must notify the president about its decision. I think he's aware of that. It's one of the few things I think he is aware of. Because of the closed nature of the process and the disagreement within the executive branch, it's unclear whether the executive branch made a formal request to keep the memo under wraps. But House Republicans are certainly behaving as if that happened, which is actually, smart. That would be the safest way of handling it. They could theoretically say, no, the executive branch is unified in the person of the president himself. He wants it released. There is no conflict in the executive branch. The unitary executive, remember that guy? The unitary executive says, release it, so we don't have to give notice to the president. And besides, that would be really stupid looking, notifying the president of his own decision. But of course, that would only happen. It's actually pretty dumb, even if it goes the other way. If the president says, yeah, I don't want this released, then the executive branch disagrees, and Congress is obligated to inform the person who made the decision of their decision. Rules are dumb sometimes. It happens. Okay, so that's where we stand. It is technically unclear what the position of the executive branch is. So, for propriety's sake, a smart intelligence committee would, in fact, notify the president of the disagreement. And here it actually makes sense, because, of course, one, it isn't the president objecting, and two, this president might have no idea what the rest of the executive branch is saying, because who cares? Give me some ice cream. What's on TV? So, there we are. From this point, then, another 5-day clock begins ticking. Once that 5-day window expires, the committee may release the information unless the president, quote, personally in writing, has notified them that the disclosure of the information presents a, quote, threat to the national interest of such gravity that it outweighs any public interest in the release. That gives them more latitude. I would say any public interest. Okay. However, I will note that this is presents another opportunity, which we won't take, but another opportunity to make waves about this thing. So the process goes, the committee says we want to release it. They vote to release it. They ask what? They send it to the president. What happens again? Let's go over this thing again. They vote. The committee approves public disclosure that was of information submitted to it by the executive branch. That's another question mark. Like, we don't know where this information came from. And they were trying to pin him down on whether or not he worked with the White House on this. Right? I may need to read this rule. If the committee approves public disclosure of classified information that was submitted to it by the executive branch, presumably if the Department of Justice and FBI don't want it released, they didn't submit it to, well, they may have been forced to submit it either under subpoena or whatever. But otherwise, it would have come from the White House, which they denied. Or no, they didn't deny. Just Nunes wouldn't answer the question about whether or not he worked with the White House on this. I guess that leaves another area for inquiry. Well, we'll double back in the history books when all of this is over and done with. So that when they vote to disclose information provided to them by the executive branch, there is a 5-day a member of the committee requests a vote on releasing it. They meet within 5 days to vote on whether or not to release it. Then the president has 5 days to say no to it. After which, if it does not happen, if the president doesn't say no personally in writing, then the information is released. The opportunity to make waves here, of course, is, I guess it won't present itself because the president isn't going to personally in writing object to the release. I suppose if he doesn't object, that's enough. He doesn't have to personally in writing approve the release. But he loves to sign things, so I wonder if they just said, let's just do that too. I don't know. Maybe not. He also doesn't like to go to work, so that may counterbalance his enjoyment of signing things. I got plenty of things to sign. We'll make up some other crap to sign. But I guess I was going to say the other opportunity for making trouble is, once again, if a written communication shows up in Congress, I'm still of the opinion that you should absolutely object that the president did not make it. And I don't trust that he wrote this. I don't trust that he signed it. I want to see him here in the president's room physically making his signature here. That's the only way I'm going to accept a message in writing from the president. But no one interested so far in taking that approach, as far as I know. If the president does issue such an objection, which he says he won't, the committee has two choices. We might as well learn this. One day, a president will object. It can let the matter die, or it can, by majority vote, refer the issue to the full House for a vote. If the committee does send the question to the full chamber, yet another clock begins ticking. If the HPSCI chair does not move to take up the matter within 4 calendar days on which the House is in session, that is to take up the matter before the full House, then any member has the ability to interrupt the House's daily order of business to move to consider the question in closed session. Debate on whether to disclose the information is limited to 2 hours. Interesting. I'd like to know the procedure for that. This provision and the companion procedures available in the Senate date to the creation of the respective chambers' intelligence panels in the 1970s, of course, in response to actual abuses of intelligence and surveillance powers during the Nixon years, and of course earlier, but all of this mandated by the Church Committee, and a little cheer and wave and yay from Joan on that one. But again, subject to dismantling in the post-Watergate relitigation of this whole thing by idiotic authoritarian Republicans. When Senate Government Operations Committee Chairman Senator Abraham Ribicoff, Democrat of Connecticut, Greg, called for the creation of a new permanent intelligence committee in conjunction with the Church Committee's work, Democrat of Idaho, Joan, the question of how to handle public disclosure of sensitive information was among the key structural issues he identified. Senators debated questions of procedural design on the floor of the chamber, including, for example, whether the new committee would have the power to overrule presidential objections, or whether the full chamber would have to vote. The Senate's debate over their procedures, which are very similar, though not identical, to the House's, reflected confidence that the Senate and the president alike would not take the task lightly. Oops. They forgot about Donald Trump, who takes everything lightly, except, of course, insults to himself. The determination of whether to support disclosure, argued Senator Alan Cranston, Democrat of California, would be one, quote, which each senator must make for himself. Back in the days before there were herselves, I guess. Using the standard and balance of competing considerations, which he deems appropriate. That, of course, from a May 1976 debate, in case you were wondering on the timing on that one. As for the president, said Senator Ribicoff, so it is obviously our intention that the president would not act capriciously, but only act if it were a matter of gravity. Of course, do you see, by the way, I'm reading this, maybe this is boring to you, or maybe it's just funny, but you see why Molly Reynolds, our author here, is including this? I mean, I think it's a pretty pointed reminder of how much, really, I was commenting on this yesterday on Twitter, how much of our law, how much of our system of governance was written with the assumption that we would, after all, for all time, have responsible, adult, mentally competent presidents, or at the very least, where a president might be lacking in any of those features, would be surrounded by competent advisors who would have in mind the long-term impact on the governability of the United States and the integrity of the Constitution. They weren't counting on this, and I think that's why she's including it. So here's the speech. Ribicoff says, it's obviously our intention that the president would not act capriciously, but only act if it were a matter of gravity. Of course, none of us could tell the president of the United States what he considers to be a grave matter. I would assume, on the basis of comity, that the president certainly is not going to abuse his discretion. Oh, that's silly Abe Ribicoff. It is my feeling that the president will act responsibly, as I would expect the Intelligent Oversight Committee would act responsibly. It says intelligent. I assume he means intelligence. Oversight Committee would act responsibly in determining whether a matter should be publicly disclosed. Well, that didn't happen either. That's weird. I would imagine that the president would seldom use a certification under this procedure, issue a certification under this procedure, so as not to wear out his standing with the Senate. Well, of course, this is happening in the House instead, but okay. He's not going to wear out his standing there either, right? Yet I would not want to put into the definition what the president must consider a matter of gravity. I am confident the president will not act capriciously, and that he will not only act to certify that the matter should not be disclosed if he thinks that the threat to the national interest posed by such disclosure is of such gravity that it outweighs any public interest in its disclosure. Again, this too from the May 19th, as a matter of fact, May 19th, 1976 debate. Mind you, we are like just 2 years past Watergate, and they still think a president will act scrupulously and honestly and only in a situation of gravity and not capriciously. Is it still immediate post-Watergate? They still can't contemplate anything but a serious approach to this stuff, which is pretty amazing. But, okay, interesting. We have to move on from this, and we'll get through this. It's not a very, very long article. Let's see what other historical treats she has for us here. Despite the careful attention paid to the Constitution on these, looks like Constitution, paid to the construction of these procedures. Despite the careful attention paid to the construction of these procedures, not the reading of them, but the construction of them, they've lain dormant in both chambers since their creation. Interesting. Even during high-profile recent conflict between Congress and the executive branch over the Senate report on CIA detention and interrogation, there was no formal effort to trigger the process. Interesting, telling as well. Like many interbranch interactions, however, a set of formal procedures on the books may have influence even if they are not actually deployed. Good point. As Mort Rosenberg, a congressional oversight expert now at the Constitution Project, has written, the disclosure process was obviously not meant to be a first resort, but the procedure has sufficient intermediate stages to increase the pressure for accommodation. It requires the president to take personal responsibility for a decision to maintain the secrecy of documents over the Intelligence Committee's objections, and to provide an explanation for that decision. Of course, the explanation could be, kiss my ass, I said so. And, in this Congress, of course, not only would they say, okay, but they'd probably kiss it too. While using the procedures to compel the release of the Nunes memo and potentially the counter memo prepared by the Democratic minority, probably not, may be new specific ground for Congress, the general idea is familiar to Congress watchers. Rules and procedure, even those which seem arcane and lost to the past, can serve as one useful tool among many as members seek to achieve their particular partisan goals. Very interesting. And I guess something to remember in all of this is that the president could, in fact, and Republicans, compliant Republicans, you can do almost anything, right? So one of the things you could do is vote to release the Nunes so-called memo and have the president not object to its release after the Republican-controlled Intelligence Committee votes for its release. And even if if they wanted to, the Republicans could vote to release the Democratic memo, and President Trump could say, no, that one isn't in the national interest. But then he would have to take personal responsibility for it. Yeah, right. Sure. That worries him in huge, huge ways. And I think they would be very happy to have that covered. I didn't vote to suppress it. It was President Trump, and he had national security reasons for doing it. Yeah, that's right. And also, give me more ice cream. Where's a porn star? I need another one. Well, that's where we are with the interesting point of procedure. Thank you, Greg, for sharing that one with us. I guess one or two other things on the memo, and then, we can sprinkle the show with a little extra esoterica as we head into the weekend. Wanted to share with you, let's see, this tweet from a couple of days ago. Let's see, what day was it? It was yesterday, a couple of days ago, meaning one. That's not even a couple. They can't even make that work. From Dan Friedman, who, of course, covering foreign influence and national security for Mother Jones. Dan Friedman had this to say with respect to the memo situation. While the FBI's Wray is out there taking on the White House on the Nunes memo, it's worth noting that the Justice Department no longer endorses Stephen Boyd's letter last week saying the memo's release could be, quote, extraordinarily reckless. I did mention to you that there seemed to have been a reversal from the DOJ, and I guess that's it. What's the details on that one? He includes his little screen grab here that says Wednesday, presumably something Wednesday, but here's the quote. The letter said we wanted to review the memo. She, whoever that is, told Mother Jones via email. It was Wednesday Adams must have said that, I guess. We have. Now we have no statement. So that's the way they reversed themselves on that. Asked if the department remained concerned that the memo's release would have a damaging impact on national security, Flores, that's who actually she is, noted that the letter says only that the memo's release could impact national security. It says could because we hadn't read it, she said. So it's the position, I guess, of the Department of Justice that without having read the memo, it could impact national security. Now, having read the memo, we think it doesn't, and so we no longer have any comment on that. That's from his piece. I guess we should take a look at the wider piece here. The White House and GOP keep changing their story on the Nunes memo, which is kind of troubling. What does the document really allege, and will Trump actually release it? Well, I don't think there was much doubt about that, but interesting that we've now caught up on the DOJ position, although I'm a little bit curious about what else might be behind that. But we'll hold that in abeyance for the moment. And, of course, Stephen Boyd, by the way, Assistant Attorney General Stephen Boyd. The letter that he sent was the one saying we haven't reviewed it, and it could be extraordinarily reckless. But now having read it, we think it's just regular reckless. I don't know. I'm not sure why exactly, but FBI hasn't changed its position. There was also a tweet or two out there hanging around there. There's the one the one I was actually thinking of, although that was an important piece. Dustin Voles has this tweet. He, a cyber and surveillance reporter at Reuters, who says something that has probably occurred to a bunch of you, particularly those of you following Empty Wheel and others tweeting on the subject. Lost in the memo coverage, it's not lost because we found it, is that Devin Nunes, long among the most strident defenders of FISA-enabled spying, has spent nearly a year trying to contort interpretations of classified surveillance to fit a political agenda. In other words, oh my God, all of these abuses that I have documented, FBI abuses of surveillance powers used to target Trump because politics, all of that, all of those worries, where have you heard those worries before? That the FBI or the surveillance powers might be used to target political enemies, and we absolutely can't allow that to happen. Well, of course, one place you would have heard it was Watergate, and one of the answers to it was what we just referred to earlier, the formations of intelligence committees, and then, of course, the passage of the FISA legislation that was meant, in spirit anyway, to guarantee, quote-unquote guarantee, that the surveillance powers, when used domestically, would only be used, one, under court, albeit secret court, supervision, and that, two, the committees would have oversight over the intelligence gathering, and then three, it would only be allowed, you could only gather intelligence on American citizens if they were in communication with an approved target of foreign surveillance, foreign intelligence surveillance. Anyway, so yeah, here's the point that we're trying to hammer out here for you. People have been worried for a long time that the surveillance power would be used to suppress domestic enemies. So we set up this entire system to prevent that from happening. And in broadening surveillance powers since, say, 9/11 in particular, the objections all the way along by those who were worried about abuse of surveillance powers in the modern context was, these powers are growing far too expansive and the oversight over them is insufficient and too secret. But Devin Nunes couldn't vote for that stuff fast enough because that's a holdover from the post-9/11 days when if you weren't with us, you're against us and you're a terrorist, and he was on board with that stuff. Now, of course, his people are the targets. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio after our short top of the hour break. I hopefully wasn't, I don't know whether I got kind of cut off at the end. I ran real close to the limit on the intro to the break. But just to recap and then to kind of catch up on some of the comments, I was just pointing out that Nunes couldn't vote fast enough for broadening surveillance powers that worried civil libertarians and others who have always had an eye on the possibility of abuse of the domestic surveillance abilities of the government for political purposes. Now, of course, for the first time ever, FISA fan Devin Nunes, who couldn't vote for surveillance fast enough because I was explaining that it grew out of the post 9/11 Republican leverage point, their mindset with which they used to win domestic elections, of course, was to beat up on Democrats who were concerned about the possibility that surveillance powers might become too broad and too political, to say, well, you people hate America and love terrorists. Why do you hate America? You don't want the president to be able to keep you safe. Why are you pro-terrorist? You're objectively pro-Saddam. Those sorts of things. You remember those arguments. And that was always their point. But now, of course, somebody else got caught up in the web. And it's Donald Trump and his cohorts who have ensnared themselves, ridiculously enough, in this surveillance by talking to and being in constant contact with Russian agents. They're foreign Russians. I don't know if you were aware of that. And if there's a suspicion that they're involved in intelligence activities, they're going to be monitored. And you don't even need to ask the court whether or not you're allowed to monitor the discussions of Russians here in the United States. You can. Bingo. Easy to do. Now, if part of the discussion that you pick up is one ringy dingy, two ringy. Oh, hello. Hi, it's Carter Page. Want to do some espionage? Comrade Page. It wouldn't be comrade, of course. They're post-Soviet, but okay. You get the idea. And that's the point at which, of course, the FBI can say, what? Carter Page? Why, he's an American citizen. He even sounds like one. We shouldn't be listening to this. Don't worry about it, because it's incidental, of course. You were monitoring the Russians. You had no idea Carter Page was going to call and ask to do some espionage. But once you get that, then you can go to the court, the FISA court, and say, so, there's this domestic guy, Carter Page. I think we would like to maybe wiretap him. Why? Now, if the answer is because he's from the other political party and we want to do some damage to that party, FISA court says, no, can't do it. That's not what this is for. Oh, right. Well, there was this other thing. He called Russians, who we were listening to because they're Russian, but that doesn't interest you. That's right. I'm not interested. What else have you got to say? Well, he called these Russians. And was he asking about vodka or selling apartments to mobsters, which is still actually probably not foreign intelligence activity per se, depending, I guess, on who's buying the apartment. Well, no, he wasn't inviting me to the Trump vodka party or anything. He called and asked, can we do some espionage? Oh, well, that's different. Now you're talking about an American cooperating in a foreign intelligence operation. Yes, I would have to say I would reluctantly give you my permission to implicate the Fourth Amendment rights of Carter Page because he called up and asked about espionage. Go for it. That's how it happened. So that's basically where we are. And Devin Nunes now thinks there's FISA abuse going on. And now you could forgive him for being just a hypocrite or not having enough foresight, which is sometimes the same thing, to see that there could be a potential problem with expanding intelligence surveillance powers, particularly domestically, even under FISA. But, he believed, well, my side is the Patriots, so we're never going to get caught up in this. But again, you could forgive him if you thought that the day will never come that Republicans are Russia-loving espionage nuts who can't get enough crime because we're such patriots, you see. So that's not going to become a problem. This is for trapping hippies who love Saddam Hussein. Okay, then. Fine. That would be one thing. But, of course, this is all happening. His votes to release his memo because they document severe abuse of the FISA statute has all happened under his watch as Intelligence Committee chair, and two, almost literally at the same time that he voted to expand FISA powers again. I hate FISA powers. They're being abused all the time. It's such a serious problem. They're politicizing it just to get Donald Trump. Well, would you like to give them more such powers? Yes, I would. Thank you very much. And the reason, of course, I would like to do that is because I would like President Trump to use it against Democrats. In the meantime, stop using it against Republicans. That's politicizing everything. Use it against Democrats. That would just be patriotism. And, there's actual sort of precedent for that method of thinking. I don't know, just even out of my personal experience, going back, of course, to like the beginning of this particular problem when George W. Bush and his administration were abusing domestic surveillance and doing it warrantlessly and conducting questionable activities, things that weren't entirely clear under FISA as qualifying as surveillance, the metadata collection, for instance, of the communications of all Americans in every format. Well, is that an abuse of the system? Yes, it is. Is it an impeachable offense? Yeah, I mean, anything is. You might decide that you want to legalize it and allow the president to do these sorts of things, and we eventually did do that. But in the meantime, until we've figured that out and decided on it, yeah, I guess it is potentially impeachable. which, when you brought it up, immediately made impeachment, that constitutional process, turned it into, in the minds of Republicans, of course, who then convinced the press, who then nodded in agreement in large part, that impeachment, bringing up impeachment, was a partisan activity. Oh, and forcing the Constitution, now a partisan activity. Now, I will admit to you that there are some times where people say, but I'm just trying to enforce the Constitution. And I say, no, you're just a partisan. And it usually comes in the format of stuff like, I would like to be able to buy this house, and I am Hispanic. Well, that's unconstitutional. Well, see, no, that isn't. You were just being partisan. And maybe not partisan, just racist. Okay. But you do run into that claim all the time. And there's certainly a large cadre of Republicans who think that claiming something is unconstitutional is tantamount to making an unassailable argument. You can't argue with me. It's the Constitution. Anyway, Dustin Volz, I think, has a very good point here. One that you likely recognized a long time ago. Devin Nunes talking out of both sides of his mouth here and not doing a particularly good job of it. All right, let's see. A few other interesting items that, let's say, we ought to put on the record. You know what? Here, we'll shift gears with this one and then take a brief segue, and I'll show you how it's going to work here. A piece of news that reached my eyes and then burned them out completely was this from where? KXAN. It's a where is that? West Coast? Texas. It must be, because Blake Farenthold is involved. Dateline Austin. You'll never guess what happened. You remember, of course, Blake Farenthold found out as a serial sexual harasser, and one of the many members exposed as having used taxpayer funds to pay settlements in those sexual harassment claims. And of course, he then said, well, okay, I won't be seeking re-election because I'm so disgraced, and I'll pay it back. I will pay back from personal funds, which he doesn't mean personal funds. He means he'll probably raise it from supporters and then use that, but it won't be taxpayer money. I'm going to pay back the taxpayer money I used to pay this settlement. X number of weeks passed. The heat is off. So now Blake Farenthold says, you know what? I think maybe I won't pay that money back. But I'm not running for re-election again, so you can't punish me. He realized, I'm not going to run for re-election. What's the worst that can happen to me? I'll lose. I'm not running. So why am I paying the money back? Maybe I won't. U.S. Representative Blake Farenthold has backed off his pledge, anyway, to pay back a taxpayer-funded sexual harassment settlement. The embattled congressman used $84,000 of taxpayer money to settle a sexual harassment complaint from a former spokesperson, his former communications director, Lauren, Green, Grene, sued him in December of 2014 over sexual harassment, gender discrimination, and creating a hostile work environment. Farenthold apparently used money from the U.S. Congressional Office of Compliance to pay the settlement, which is pretty amazing all by itself. It wasn't even his, his office funds. Like, he'll have less to spend in his office because he used $84,000. There will be at least some ding there, right? You might have to cut salaries or fire staff or cut back on some activities. Nope. Don't worry about it. We'll have the U.S. Congressional Office of Compliance pay it. That's like a line item, really? Well, Office of Compliance, I understand. We're supposed to make sure you guys comply with the law, right? And our idea of how to do that is, if you break the law, we'll pay. That's a terrible office, if you ask me. Anyway, this prompted calls for his resignation and reimbursement of the settlement, which is currently at the hands of taxpayers. A member of his communications staff, who we imagine he's not currently harassing, says on the advice of counsel, Farenthold is waiting to see what changes the House makes to the Congressional Accountability Act before repaying the funds. KXAN contacted the Congressional Office of Compliance to confirm the status of the payment, but we've not yet received a response as of this publication. Farenthold said in a TV interview on December 4th that he would repay the settlement that week. But he's playing Donald Trump games. I'm just not going to do it. And maybe the law or the rules will be changed later on and I won't have to pay. even though I was completely exonerated by the Office of Congressional Ethics. Really? And the settlement agreement has been paid. I'm doing my best, and I am going to hand a check over this week to probably Speaker Ryan or somebody. I don't know who. Don't know what the procedure is. Didn't bother to check. Have no intention of doing it. And say, look, here's the amount of my settlement. Give it back to the taxpayers, he told KRIS-TV. I want to be clear that I didn't do anything wrong, but I also don't want the taxpayers to be on the hook for this. And I want to be able to talk about it and fix the system without people saying, Blake, you benefited from the system. You don't have a right to talk about it or fix it, he said that day. Days after filing for re-election, Farenthold announced, okay, I won't run for my seat on December 14th, after new revelations came out of inappropriate behavior in his office. I allowed a workplace culture to take root in my office that was too permissive and decidedly unprofessional, he said in a video posted to his campaign Facebook page. It accommodated destructive gossip, offhand comments, off-color jokes, and behavior that in general was less than professional. I allowed the personal stress of the job, oh boy, to manifest itself in angry outbursts and too often a failure to treat people with the respect that they deserved. The Corpus Christi Republican continued, that was wrong. Clearly, it's not how I was raised. Not that clear. It's not who I am, and for that situation I am profoundly sorry. Farenthold is one of a handful of lawmakers who faced calls for resignation after accusations of inappropriate sexual behavior. And of course, we got to mention a Democrat or two in there in order to make this article fair. They are John Conyers and Al Franken, and so therefore fair and balanced. Thank you. Great journalism on that. At the end there. So, well, I don't know. I mean, it's not tremendously important news, but again, it's one of those things that in this atmosphere you could probably count on people not noticing and maybe even get away with. So I thought I would say it on the radio so that that didn't happen. I don't know whether we really have that kind of sway, but I thought I'd put it out there. Okay. Let's see, 10:15 just about. And, well, I've been holding something in reserve that I don't know. I think it's still relevant. Maybe the mention of Blake Farenthold has put us back in mind of such things. But Eric Postman submitted one of his own original essays in voiced format, of course. But it came in last week. And I probably should have played it then and there when the Stormy Daniels news was hotter. And then I thought, I can use it after the State of the Union because she's on the Jimmy Kimmel show. But it's bigger than that. It's not just about Stormy Daniels, but it's in the context of Stormy Daniels. And I want to say that again because Stormy Daniels is a porn star and porn. Therefore, the double entendres, now you've considered yourselves warned and prepared. The double entendres come fast and furious, and I mean that. They come fast and furious, and you'll see what I mean when I play it. It's an edgy bit, I'll say. And, well, he'll take we'll lay all the responsibility at Eric's feet here, but he's gone through the trouble, and it's funny, so I thought I would share it with you, and it's got a broader point, too. So why don't I roll that, make sure we get it in before our next break. Eric, now that I've embarrassed you, if you please, luckily this is on tape. You can't back out of it now. Are you ready? Here we go.
Good morning, Kagro. It's Eric from Orlando. I'm going to take a little different direction here and dive in with the Trump effect on how we consume news and how it's a lot like pornography. At least that's what I've heard. Our otherwise mundane existences are interrupted by the provocative, fleeting events which we're voyeuristically transfixed by. Our blood pressure rises while we get our Twitter tease. Then we go back to reality and forget our fixations until we get triggered again. We are addicted to the porn of this presidency, where we all take turns between excitement, obsession, shame, and subsequent emptiness. Or so I'm told. And we're on an endless feedback loop. So while the Trump news cycle spits out storylines on an hourly basis, it's taking an actual porn item, Stormy Daniels, to penetrate and come inside and stay for a while. This gives us the time to actually relax with a cigarette and think up saucy innuendo and clever puns. We laugh to keep from crying at the sheer insanity that the President of the United States paid 6 figures in hush money to an adult film star. David Waldman recently queried what the best White House porn name would be, There are so many word games we could play, so many names we can fix. But there's only one Hope Hicks. Maybe she can spin it. Yes, the Mueller probe may be expanding, but be careful, this West Wing Wonder Woman is angling for premature exoneration. And be sure to order the full box set, starting with Hope Hicks, How She Does It, and all the stunning sequels. Hope Hicks 2, How Does She Do That? Hope Hicks 3, Make Me Comment. Hope Hicks 4, Press Against Me. Hope Hicks 5, Ready to Flack. Hope Hicks 6, Private Briefing. Hope Hicks 7, Robo Call Girl. Hope Hicks 8, Hardly Legal. Hope Hicks 9, The First Fluffer. And Hope Hicks 10, On Both Sides. Both sides. Hope Hicks will assure to toss your word salad and firm up your statement all the way to completion. Just be sure to be kind and rewind. Now back to more serious programming from Netroots Radio. At least that's what I'm told.
Yeah, well, you'll be disappointed in that. No, thank you, Eric. Okay, well, it's a morning show, but it's Friday, and I assume we'll let that pass for late night. I mean, it's late week. We don't do a night show, but it is late in the week, and so I think after Wednesday, it's okay to bring out the PG-13 material. Everything was fully legal there, as far as I know, and like I said, a larger and more prescient point, even than perhaps we knew, with the Hope Hicks angle, and that she, of course, now mixed up in everything, and all the fans of the show have had a ball over the last couple of days using the old catchphrase of Hope Hicks, how does she do it? Let's see. Armando says, yeah, that was pretty rough. Yeah, there were definitely some moments there like, holy mackerel. I don't know if we can get away with this, but it's a podcast, and so I suppose that we can. I really didn't want to back away from that and leave it hanging out there, because I mean it was a humorous essay. Yeah, we're just kidding. Holy mackerel! I've created an unsafe working environment for myself, but okay. Anyway, yeah. So the Hope Hicks bit, that's true. We do have that problem hanging out there. Let's see if we can't catch up on that and a few other things. Oh yes. First of all, though, by way of correction, I floated out there the other day the possibility that the Russia sanctions were possibly being violated by the delivery of some Russian-produced natural gas and offloading of it in Boston, as a matter of fact, being carried to Boston by a third-party flagged ship, and that this was sort of circumventing the sanctions regime. But I'm not certain that it does. I think it qualifies as legal, which is why it's sort of happening in broad daylight. But I guess it's highly questionable in terms of the spirit of the sanctions. And certainly this president would be enforcing those sanctions more weakly than any other that we might expect. But I'm not certain that it wouldn't or couldn't have happened under other administrations. I checked around and found the Boston Globe's report on this. When it comes to Russian gas, just say "niet," an editorial in the Boston Globe. And it explains things this way. With the arrival of a ship full of Russian gas on Sunday, New England's odd energy politics took another bizarre turn. As an unintended result of restrictive shipping laws on the federal level, combined with efforts by local officials to block gas pipelines. We're for that, right? Bay State customers will now instead burn gas extracted from the delicate Arctic ecosystem by a firm linked to one of Vladimir Putin's cronies. This is some odd energy politics, to be sure. And wait till you hear about the restrictive shipping laws. Bells will ring, and you'll say, I heard it first. Maybe not, but I heard it first on Kagro in the morning, because they were, of course, reading the morning paper, which printed it. So credit where credit is due. After sitting for 3 days off Nahant, Nahant, all you Boston area shipping folks will know what that means. The Gaseles or Gaseles. You tell me how to pronounce this one. I think it's a French tanker. The Gaselys. Gaseles? I don't know. A 950-foot tanker slipped into Boston Harbor Sunday morning, carrying the liquefied equivalent of 3.3 billion cubic feet of gas. A portion of the cargo, came from Russia's Yamal LNG, liquid natural gas, Yamal LNG export facility in Siberia, and was purchased by Distrigas, D-I-S-T-R-I, like distributor, Distrigas, owner of the Everett facility, as a result of the recent cold snap. Gaseles was carrying Yamal's first ever shipment, and its transatlantic trip was closely tracked by gas analysts. It had departed the vast $27 billion terminal last month in an inaugural ceremony presided over by Putin himself. The company has been subject to U.S. sanctions since 2014. That is Yamal LNG, right? When one of its biggest shareholders, Russian billionaire Gennady Timchenko, was identified by the Treasury Department, Obama's Treasury Department, 2014, as part of Putin's inner circle and, reportedly, his judo club. They're pretty close. But instead of going to Asia, as initially expected, the gas was unloaded in Britain and then transferred to this ship, the Gaseles. It may have been mixed with gas from other sources, but a spokeswoman for Distrigas, Carol Churchill, confirmed that the shipment also contained Russian LNG. Only the exporter is sanctioned, not the gas itself. That's one of the problems here, maybe a loophole that we need to take care of. So Yamal LNG is sanctioned, but the gas itself is free to go wherever it wants, even if it's mined by these guys. Great sanctions, by the way. So the transaction did not violate sanctions. So that's the conclusion of, or actually, there's a little bit more here. I have to press the button. It looked like the conclusion. I'm like, that's an awful place to leave it, but that's important. So I don't think we can officially say sanctions have been violated, but wow, what a loophole. The gas is mined by Yamal LNG, and if they sell it to a non-sanctioned distributor like Distrigas, it's fine. So, in other words, an American company can pay a sanctioned Russian company for its gas, and I don't know why that's not a violation of its sanctions, but the gas can come in, because what has the gas done wrong? It's just gas. I mean, come on. It was brought here against its will when it was too young to object, and something. It's like DACA for gas. It's like Uber, but for DACA gas. You see what I'm saying? To gas industry analysts, the voyage of the Gaseles represents a PR coup for Putin at a time he's on the defensive for sowing instability in Ukraine and meddling in U.S. elections. It's a political victory for Putin, said Agnia Grigas, author of The New Geopolitics of Natural Gas, one of my favorites, and a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. This project that the U.S. didn't want to come about, this Siberian terminal, and not only is it successful, but its first cargo is actually going to go to Boston. The United States, anywhere in the United States would have been a coup. I don't know why Boston in particular, but it's a Boston paper. Unloaded in Everett, the gas will be distributed to both utilities and power generators. According to Churchill, the fuel aboard the Gaseles is enough to heat 30,000 homes for a year. She would not say how much it cost. The first reason a Russian firm got the state's business is one of the oldest and most entrenched mistakes in U.S. law. I told you a bell was going to ring. Are you ready? I don't have the bell sound effect. Ding. Here you go. The Jones Act. Remember the Jones Act, who had a supporting role in the Puerto Rico crisis ongoing? Remember that? The Jones Act, an antiquated rule that effectively stops America from exporting LNG to itself and forces companies like Distrigas to shop overseas instead. Check out how this happens. According to a Government Accountability Office report issued in 2015, There are no LNG tankers in America that comply with the act, which prohibits foreign-made or foreign-flagged ships from moving goods between U.S. ports. A U.S.-made tanker, to make one that would carry this stuff, would cost around $400 million to $675 million. That's an awful lot of millions of dollars, don't you think? And that compared to $200 million to $225 million for foreign-made tankers. Not surprisingly, U.S. shipbuilders aren't lining up to make the tankers that would be needed to connect domestic markets to American LNG producers. We believe the law has become ineffective, and it's affecting our domestic economy, Churchill said. There's a little bit more to this story, which perhaps we'll share after our final break and heading into the final segment of the show. We'll be right back after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, heading into our final segment here. We'll wrap up with the Boston Globe editorial, which reminds us exactly what's going on up there and clarifies a little bit for us about whether or not it in fact violates sanctions and really exposes the porousness of the sanctions. Anyway, and so why do they object to it so much there in Russia? I'm not really sure. It seems pretty easy to get around. But a guest appearance by the Jones Act, which I guess prohibits the American, well, I guess it would prohibit energy producers anywhere, really, but in the Boston area in this case, from importing American liquid natural gas from another port and moving it to Boston because there are no American ships. I guess the Jones Act requires that shipments in between, domestic shipments in between American cities, American ports, be carried by an American fleet, and there isn't an American tanker large enough or equipped correctly, or I mean, do we have no liquid natural gas tankers? Is that what we're? How can that be? I mean, we are exporting liquid natural gas, right? We're just pumping it onto other ships. But I guess we can't move it between American ports unless it's done by an American ship. And so therefore, if you want to get liquid natural gas into Boston's harbor, or Everett, this offloading facility, I guess in Everett, it has to be done on a foreign ship. So you might as well be buying foreign gas. Go ahead and do it. No point in trying to buy the American stuff and having somebody else carry it, because you'd have to export it and then re-import it, and that's a big pain in the butt. All right, and Armando pointing out quite correctly, yeah, I mean, I know why. I guess the sanctions are still a big deal to the Russians because there's transactions cost with everything. You make something more complicated, it's going to raise the price. It costs money to get around the sanctions, to transfer that gas off of a Russian tanker into a gas facility in Britain, and then off of the British facility and onto the French tanker and brought to here. Well, I assume there's a lot more of the profit could go into their pockets if they could just put it on a Russian boat and carry it from Siberia to Boston and be done with it. But anyway, it's but then again, that keeps the other grifters that are necessary to evade sanctions in the game, right? There's bigger profit in it for them because they're the middlemen who are able to skim something off of the take and be happy. Otherwise, your partners in the grift get upset and they end up turning you in. But okay, I don't need to. I'm not trying to tell you how to run your grift business, Putin. You do you. Anyway, here's the conclusion of the piece here. As much as it needs reform, the Jones Act isn't under the state's control. Remember, this is a Boston paper up here. Its restrictive approach to gas pipelines, though, is something state policymakers could relax. We just wish they wouldn't. This is one of the prices you have to pay for your environmentalism, is that gas will be more expensive and or come from Russia, where they don't give a crap about the environment, and they'll kill the Arctic just as fast as they can to sell you the gas you want to keep your heating bills low. It's one of those things we have to be willing to pay higher heating bills in order to stand on our environmental principles, and not everybody is able to do that. So maybe we're willing to subsidize their heating bills, and we are. We do it every year, but just the complex interplay in all of it is worth noting. So I don't think you need to change your pipeline approach, but generally speaking, I guess the newspaper there, Boston Globe, is really interested in seeing you do that. The ship's arrival revived the debate over whether Massachusetts needs more natural gas pipeline capacity for fracked gas from the Marcellus Shale. You can see where this goes pretty quickly. Even before the ship's arrival, New England had burned large amounts of oil and coal during the cold snap. Dirtier fuels, tisk tisk. They're trying to tut you into fracking the Marcellus Shale, everybody. Dirtier fuels that could have been avoided with more access to gas. The industry says LNG demand could be reduced too. Additional pipeline capacity would reduce the region's reliance on LNG. How so? To serve periods of high demand for the power generators, and would reduce costs to customers, said Caroline Prettyman, a spokeswoman for Eversource, good name for polluter, while noting that the region would still need LNG even with additional capacity. No argument given for why it would reduce the region's reliance on LNG. I guess because the Marcellus Shale isn't L. It's just G. Is that it? All right, whatever. Governor Charlie Baker, through a spokesperson, said his administration supported renewables and also wanted, quote, to expand natural gas capacity along existing right-of-ways so the Commonwealth can provide Massachusetts residents and businesses with reliable, cost-effective, clean energy while reducing carbon emissions. That's the clean part. And avoiding reliance on wildly expensive foreign LNG shipments. Woo! Look out for those. Attorney General Maura Healey has generally taken a more skeptical stance, that's good, and issued a report in 2015 downplaying the benefits of additional capacity. She has said that ratepayers could achieve greater savings, about $145 million worth, compared to only $65 million in savings from a pipeline, through energy efficiency and other measures that make use of existing infrastructure. Opposition to pipelines arose initially out of environmental concerns, but LNG, to say nothing of the oil and coal that served as a backup earlier this winter, may not be cleaner than piped gas would be. Scientists seek to measure life cycle emissions, a way of accounting for climate impact that encompasses not just consumption, but also upstream emissions. That's good. We would like to see all of that. Gas, for instance, burns cleaner than coal or oil, but if too much methane leaks during transit, those fugitive emissions can offset the benefit. All other things being equal, as said Leslie Abrams, a researcher at Carnegie Mellon University, LNG creates more greenhouse gas emissions because of the extra steps involved in chilling it to minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit, shipping it, and then regasifying it. Abrams said that estimating the life cycle emissions of Russian LNG would be difficult, though, because of the lack of data from Russia. While U.S. leakage rates are studied intensively, Russia's have to be guessed. What is known is that another shipment of Russian gas is loading at the French port of Dunkirk, also recently in our American consciousness, again bound for Boston. Russia's dirty, dirty fuels and dirty oligarchs are suddenly our problem. Well, good point. An all-encompassing kind of approach to the situation. But I just thought not only does it sort of correct the record on whether or not it's a real violation of sanctions and reveal a real problem in our sanctions regime, even minus the fact that Trump intends never to enforce existing sanctions and will impose no new ones, but also the nettlesome problem of what's cleaner than what when it comes to fossil fuels. And of course, the answer is none of it is very clean, and we shouldn't be piping gas around, and we shouldn't be fracking the Marcellus Shale, and we shouldn't be importing liquid natural gas, but we should be doing something else super clean and awesome and renewable. And what are those things? Well, we have some alternatives, but our capacity, of course, for exploring some of them, like solar, for instance, being tamped down a bit, one could say, with Trump's latest recent action as well. Anyway, energy not my front exactly. Plenty of better experts to tell you what we could and should be doing on that front. Other stories, though, spotting things that are interesting that I don't necessarily understand. That is my wheelhouse. And I've got a couple more to share with you here before we close things out. How about this? A tweet from Adam Smith. Always a good idea. This week in Trump administration staffing, he shares with us 4 headlines screen captured and enclosed in this tweet. The top number here is NLRB, National Labor Relations Board. NLRB member is under investigation for a conflict of interest. William Emanuel, already criticized for allegedly favoring clients of the corporate law firm he used to work for, now faces a probe by the agency's Inspector General. NLRB, William Emanuel, please do take note. Next headline, using his position for private gain. We mentioned this one. Ben Carson was warned he might run afoul of ethics rules by enlisting his son. We didn't get to the story, though I shared it with you the other day. Ben Carson, that's HUD. Please take note. Trump pick for Chile ambassador entwined in Kushner family deals. Wow, I had no idea that Kushner had his claws into Chile. Right now, of course, Chile, the home country of the mining magnate from whom he and Ivanka have rented their home. And he recently, of course, the winner of big mining concessions in Minnesota, adjacent to the Border Waters canoe area where all the Boy Scouts go for their Northern Tier High Adventure Camp. Gee whiz, that strange connection with Chile, and the new ambassador to Chile, who, of course, would be of interest to any mining magnates with whom you might have particular or personal interests, would, of course, be very interested in knowing that the ambassador to Chile was a friendly type person. Hey, don't worry about it. He's one of my people. He's entwined in my family deals. I will provide, of course, the tweet for you, and that'll give you the headlines. I would say at this point, late in the show, Google will have to be your friend. I'd like to find these stories. Maybe we can revisit them next week. If you can't wait, we'll give you the headlines, and you can Google those and read those stories. Finally, CDC director resigns over financial conflicts of interest. If I recall correctly, this is the woman whose job included oversight of tobacco regulations, trading in tobacco stocks, even as she tended to that important job. CDC also, of course, under attack. And I did read somewhere this morning in passing that the Trump administration was looking for something like an 80% cut in the funding for overseas prevention of infectious disease spreads. And, of course, we're in the middle of the cold and flu season as well. So lots going on at CDC while they're under attack. Let's see. Other stories necessary to share with you that we have not yet gotten to. Let's see. Oh, yes. Here's a random bit from our friend with all the random bits on Donald Trump. Werter van der Horst tweeting an excellent observation the other day. As it seems, Gates and Manafort, now back in the news, of course, Gates, maybe, as I understand, his lawyers resigning from his case. Everyone with a big question mark about what that might mean. Gates and Manafort are, of course, hard up for cash that they owe to Russian oligarchs. Here's something I didn't really register about Gates. Why did Trump put Gates in charge of the 2016 inaugural slush fund? You remember, we've talked a number of times about the record-breaking, and here he did, in fact, break the record-breaking $100 million plus raised for Trump's, economy-sized inauguration, and no requirement by the FEC for any reporting on how the money is spent. I've always had questions about that. Did you know that it's Gates that's in charge? That is, I guess, is he the treasurer? Is that what it is? He's got some receipts on this. A reference to it here in this WTOP news radio story. Rick Gates, a Trump survivor, is tested by the, come on, open it up here. Come on, computer. Tested by Mueller probe. This from back in November, though making mention of the fact that he is the manager of Trump's $107 million inauguration fund. And that, I think, really ought to become a relevant talking point in his continuing case. So I want to put that out there for you for your Friday consideration. Thanks to Wouter, how do you say it? Vanderhorst for bringing us that little bit of news. Not sure where it leads. Just a piece of the puzzle I think you need to have in hand. Let's see. One tidbit I neglected to mention on the Nunes memo. And by the way, some pronunciation tips again from this one from Chief Beef Loco on the Portuguese pronunciation. I guess in among real Portuguese speakers, I guess they would say Nunes, like Nunes. He said Nunes, and so that's a little bit too complicated for me to deal with. But Nunes, and he probably doesn't say it that way either. He, I think, says Nunes is just Nunes is what I've been hearing. But people lose touch with their background and heritage, and they may never have had any serious ability to speak in the language of their alleged motherland. Anyway, let's see. What else have we got here? So I just wanted to note, at least for the record, on that memo, Nancy Pelosi's latest move, which was a strongly worded statement, we'll say. Pelosi sends letter to Speaker Ryan. I guess, an actual sternly worded letter to Speaker Ryan calling for the removal of Nunes and from his chairmanship and an end to the House Republicans' partisan charade, as it is put here. And the letter, of course, pointing out that this whole activity has really seriously impacted the ability of the House's Intelligence Committee to conduct its business professionally, and it's damaging to the House's stature. Would represent, of course, a question of the privileges of the House if she wanted to bring a privileged resolution for his removal. But as she puts it in the letter here, Chairman Nunes and House Republicans releasing this bogus memo has taken the GOP's cover-up campaign to a new and a completely unacceptable extreme. Both the DOJ and FBI oppose releasing the memo, although it's questionable now with the DOJ. As the Department of Justice warned the public, releasing the memo would be an unprecedented action and extraordinarily reckless. The FBI also expressed that the agency has grave concerns about material omissions of fact that fundamentally impact the memo's accuracy. It's now come to our attention that Nunes deliberately and materially altered the contents of the memo. That's the serious issue that she's worried about, since it was voted on by the House Republicans. This action is not only dangerous, it is illegitimate and violates House rules. From the start, Congressman Nunes has disgraced the House Intelligence Committee. Since pledging to recuse himself from the Trump-Russia investigation, he's abused his position to launch a highly unethical and dangerous cover-up campaign for the White House. His deliberately dishonest actions make him unfit to serve as chairman, and he must be removed immediately from this position. House Republicans' pattern of obstruction and cover-up to hide the truth about the Trump-Russia scandal represents a threat to our intelligence and our national security. The GOP has led a partisan effort to distort intelligence and discredit U.S. law enforcement and intelligence communities. It's long overdue that you, as Speaker, put an end to the charade and hold him and all congressional Republicans accountable to the oath they have taken to support and defend the Constitution and protect the American people. The integrity of the House is at stake. We look forward to your immediate action on this subject. Of course, we will get no immediate action and maybe no action ever but well worth putting on the record. And of course, it is your prerogative, and especially as minority leader, offering a privileged resolution to remove him would force them, they'd table it to be sure, but it would force a vote, and you could do it at any time. You know that, though, and I don't need to tell you. Just reminding everybody else so that they can pressure you at some point to go ahead and do that. Let's see. Other important items of note. Let's see. One, perhaps a little less important, but still, well, a good piece for Friday. That guy in Hawaii who accidentally told everybody that there was a missile incoming, he has been fired now. And I think we all knew that, and I guess we all anticipated it probably. But I have a new piece of news to share with you. I mean, newish to me anyway. The AP reporting, this is really something. The Hawaii worker, now fired, who sent that false alert, had problems in the past, but kept his job. Apparently, it's not the first time. That was rather astonishing. Hawaii emergency management officials knew for years that an employee had problems performing his job. Then he sent that false alert warning of an imminent missile attack earlier this month. The worker has previously mistakenly believed drills for tsunami and fire warnings were actual events. And colleagues were not comfortable working with him, the state said Tuesday. Now, I don't know how you get to, I mean, it's like not a job that normally there's I wouldn't think, a stack of paperwork saying we're uncomfortable working with you. Maybe for sexual harassment, that could happen anywhere. But the guy keeps mistaking drills for reality. That's not good. His supervisors counseled him, but kept him for a decade. You don't want to fire anybody. I'm sure they were nice guys and they didn't want to fire him. But they kept him for a decade in a position that had to be renewed each year. So like 10 years worth of, he keeps making this mistake. But all right. How bad could it get? What's he going to mistakenly tell people there's a missile coming? I mean, well, I guess that can happen too. I didn't realize we even had that in our warning system. Check the software. What else can it say? Godzilla warning. Oh no, my God, I didn't even think this was real. This is tough stuff. The problems in the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency went beyond one troubled employee. The agency had a vague checklist for missile alerts, allowing workers to interpret the steps they should follow differently. Who knew? Managers didn't require a second person to sign off on alerts before they were sent, and the agency lacked any preparation on how to correct a false warning. Those details emerged Tuesday in federal and state reports investigating how the agency mistakenly blasted cell phones and broadcast stations January 13th. You know all about it, with the warning that led hundreds of thousands of people to believe they were about to die in a nuclear attack. And it took nearly 40 minutes to retract it. Hawaii Emergency Management Agency Administrator Vern Miyagi, not even kidding, Miyagi, resigned as the reports were released. Officials revealed that the employee who sent the alert was fired Friday. His name has not been revealed. A second worker quit before disciplinary action was taken, and another was suspended without pay, officials say. All right, well, I mean, there's more to it, but I found that really amazing. That, it's sort of like one of those you had one job things. I had it, and I had it for 10 years. I just never could do it. Okay, it's, just the fact that there was only one job doesn't mean anything. Can you do the one job? Oh, that? No, I can't. But it was just one job. Okay, I just thought that was really kind of interesting, and never really would have imagined that would be the case anywhere. All right, moving on to a couple of other items here that absolutely, whatever. I'm going to say they absolutely need to be shared. One item in the fake news file. I'll just give you the headline on this and share the article with you at some point later today. Native American Facebook pages that push fake news are actually run out of Kosovo. I learned this via Media Matters earlier this week. Alex Kaplan writing the story. I'll give you the lead. There's an update here. That's the lead. Since the publication of this article, all of the Facebook pages identified by Media Matters have been taken down. So kudos to you for doing the Lord's work there, or the work of, I don't know, whatever spiritual entity worshipped by the various Native American groups if they practice their traditional religions. I don't know that they actually do, but if they do, we want to include them too. That's whose work you're doing in getting these things taken down. I just wanted to point out, though, that other ethnicities and other subsegments of the American populace being targeted, this time, though, from Kosovo, but we all remain vulnerable, and I just thought I might share that one for your weekend edification. How about this? One quick hit, one programming note, and then one maybe quick news item. Quick news hit. This one surfaced under what circumstances I couldn't even tell you. I don't know why it hit the news, but we got this report. LPGA star, Ladies Professional Golf Association, star on Trump. He cheats like hell. Now, you always knew that that was the case. But one, this does come from someone who considers themselves a friend of Trump's. And two, a woman who considers herself a friend. And three, she's Norwegian. So it's okay for her to be in this country. But yeah, just basically reconfirming all of the golf cheating stories we knew about earlier. Just wanted to sort of put that on the record. And I'll share the article with you so you can laugh at the specifics of how he cheats if you are so inclined. Let's see. Programming note. A series on television here. Let's see. Where can we find this thing? The New York Times reviewing the series The Confidence Man, the last installment of which focuses on Donald Trump. So, yeah, very interesting. It's a Netflix documentary, so those of you who like to Netflix and chill can do so. And I think this whole thing is available now, so you might want to spend part of your weekend on that. The Netflix documentary, it's called The Confidence Man. And the last episode, I think, focusing on Donald Trump. And in their installment, the sixth, I think, in that series, two apprentice producers say they found the actual Trump Organization offices too dated and dowdy for TV. So not only did we find out that they were originally contemplating a comedy, but ended up producing a show, the idea of which was to present Donald Trump as a successful businessman. The actual Trump Tower offices were too dowdy and dated for TV. So that fifth floor set in which they held the program and set him up to look like a power broker was basically their idea of what a boardroom that Donald Trump worked in should look like. And by the way, modeled on the darkened lair, it says, where the mogul Arthur Jensen, played by Ned Beatty, dresses down the rebellious newsman Howard Beale in Network. So a very interesting side note there, but we'll all probably want to take an hour or two to take a look at that sixth episode of The Confidence Man and find out what they found out about Donald Trump, some of which is in this review. And then let's see, last bit before we exit for the weekend here. Where did this one go? Got to scroll down. Yes, this one from BuzzFeed about those sanctions. This was kind of a weird story. Trump administration admits, remember when it put out its 11:50 p.m. list of oligarchs it was going to sanction because it was required to do so? It cribbed its list. From where? Forbes magazine. Basically, Trump said, I need the names of some rich Russians, and I don't know any that aren't already on the list, and I got to put out a list. Give me Forbes magazine. If there's anybody on this list that isn't on the sanctions list, call him an oligarch, put him on the list. That's how the man does his homework. I really thought that was an amazing tidbit. Wanted to share that one with you from John Hudson at BuzzFeed. Really astonishing. Are any of them going to sue him? We should loosen up the libel laws so that some of these people they're probably not falsely named as oligarchs can sue Donald Trump. And when you're done, you can sue me because I just said it wasn't false. Sorry about that, Russian pals. What a way to close out for the weekend. All right, so let's see. Let's get all things queued up here so that I can let you know what's coming up next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And maybe we'll get through a whole bunch of these tidbits here and give Justice his due here. What do we got? Let's see. Oh, Fridays. It's Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. How do you like that? Starting off in the Bistro Cafe. I'll give you the full effect here. The only ones benefiting from the newness memo are Trump and Putin. He gets to find out where all our intelligence operatives are, I guess. Then, on the rest of the menu, the Trump administration is kicking off a gold rush-style grab of public lands. Minnesota. Remember that place? Minnesota Republicans lose their minds when Muslim voters train for participation in the caucuses. Oh my God, I knew we had to do something about those caucuses. And a federal judge used Citizens United to rule Florida's lifetime ban on voting by felons is unconstitutional. Yeah, I kind of like that one too, and you'll hear more about it on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. After their break, they move to the chef's table to investigate. This is where all the good esoterica comes in. Why Chevron stands accused of a $2 million witness bribery plot in that Ecuadorian pollution case, and how spies learned to stop worrying and love the Fitbit. Ooh, that was a good story, too. I'm glad you picked up on that one, Justice. All that and more on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef de Cuisine, Justice Putnam. Next, bon appetit.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Hey, holy crap, I finished the whole Justice Putnam thing here, so I have nothing to say in the few seconds we have left before we actually exit from the show. I'll just thank you then for hanging in there with us for another week and completing the first month of 2018. Congratulations, you're 1/12 of the way through. Man, it's getting closer every day. We'll see you again on Monday.